Call to order a meeting of the Wilsonville City Council for our work session, pre-council work session. I will start by asking if councilors have reviewed the agenda and items on consent. Any comments there? Seeing none. Any councilor concerns? All right, we'll move to the pre-council work session item, statewide transportation improvement fund plan for the upcoming fiscal year 26-27 biennium.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Kelsey Lewis, your Grants and Programs Manager. I work in the Transit Department, SMART. And I'm here tonight to talk with you about the statewide transportation investment fund plan for the upcoming biennium, which is fiscal year 26 and 27. So we're just in the beginning planning stages. Here we go. So first I'm going to talk about the timeline and then the projects that the budget we've included and the projects we've included, and then I'll be here for your feedback. So to get started, this process, it's a biennium plan. So every 2 years we come together to do this plan. We start the process at SMART at the department level. And we've been developing the plan since probably about March, working on which projects to include. And we've gathered those together this summer. We'll then take that, our plan will be incorporated into the qualified entity plan, which is led by TriMet. They are the qualified entity, or the QE, and we incorporate our plan into theirs. And then the entire plan from TriMet goes to the Oregon Transportation Commission to be approved in January, so 2025. So the estimates we're using currently are pretty round numbers. We don't have any new estimates from ODOT yet in 2024, so we're using the best estimates that we have from the last biennium and most recent that we've received in 2023. So our plan is looking like approximately $4 million in the regular STIF, the statewide transportation fund funding. We also are assuming or guessing that the unspent funds from the biennium that we are currently in will be about $2.5 million. And that funding is mostly funds that we haven't been able to yet spend for operations of the Clackamas Town Center route. And then the last bucket there is regional coordination funds. So these are used, this is kind of a subcategory from TriMet that is used to promote regional coordination. So small shuttles, things that go between communities. So that's where our Clackamas Town Center also falls into. That funding will be coming in the next biennium. So I also wanted to mention now that the STIF funding pot includes STF. That was the former Special Transportation Fund. That's the funding for older adults and people with disabilities. That's all coordinated in this fund now. They've been combined. So it's about 8.1 million that we're looking at for projects. So we're excited for that. Here we have the projects that we're planning to use these funds for in the next 2 years. Many of them are continuation projects, so continuing on the service that we already have, the routes 1X to Salem, 2X to Tualatin, 7, which is here in town, and the Villebois shuttle, which is local. And then that new service that we've been talking about for a long time, but we're really very close to getting to the Clackamas Town Center route and Woodburn service. So we're also, as you know, working on that transit-oriented development that's going in next to the transit center, and we'll have a customer service facility. So that funding for customer service staff is included in this plan. And then continuation of our out-of-town medical dial-a-ride. In terms of capital, we also have money in there for continuing to buy buses, really leveraging our funds that we have, the federal funds. This is a way to just make all of those dollars go farther. We're looking at including a new supervisor van, and bus stop amenities and improvements around town. So there are a few of our plans that come from the transit master plan that we adopted in 2023. That plan calls for a few new stops here and there in town, and so we put some funding into this plan to pay for those amenities. And last but not least, we have a project in there for a little bit of consultant funds to help us site the transit hub on the east side of town. So of course, you know, the transit centers on the west side, I-5 in the middle. We wanted another much smaller transit hub on the east side of town, in town center, to give us another location for more transfer space for different routes, to make it easier for people to transfer between different routes. So those are the plans that we're looking at, the projects we would like to do in that next 2-year period. And that's really it. Very short presentation. I would love to hear your feedback.
I've got a couple questions. When I read the staff report, could you, the supervisor van can you give me some background on that? And also on the consultant for the town center transit, have you already answered my question on that one? But yeah, on the supervisor van, did we not have one prior?
We do have supervisor vans. We actually increased to having 4 supervisors instead of 3 in the last year. This is part of our transition to increase the number of routes we have and increase our service hours that we're covering.
Got it. And then the only other question I had was back on your numbers on the STIF. Mm-hmm. Could you go back there? So is there any sunset on the spend, on the STIF unspent from prior years? Does that sunset after a period of time where we no longer have access to those funds?
Nope. This is how we roll it over to the next.
So there's indefinite rollover. So to speak, right? I mean,
yes.
It obviously clears itself out year to year.
Yeah, we try to spend it all.
Sure. Okay, great, thank you.
So sometimes you can't spend it because we're waiting on other other conditions outside of our control, right?
Right, but my concern was sometimes when you've got grants involved and things like that, that it has to be accomplished and spent in a certain period of time, but that doesn't apply here.
It doesn't apply here.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, those were good questions. I wondered about the transition space, as you described it, at Town Center. Can you just talk a little bit more about that, what that would look like? And I know, and maybe just the various distant locations people can access from each of our transit hubs.
Sure. So currently we have just the one transit center. That's where all of our buses, for the most part, converge and go to different places. What we're looking for is something very small. We're not talking about any parking. Mostly it would be enough space to have 2 transit bays, so enough space for 2 40-foot buses to park, and enough space to have a break room for drivers to be able to, between their runs, to be able to, take lunches, take a break, use the restroom, those kinds of spaces. So it wouldn't be like a customer service center. It would more so be a space for us to stop, to finish a run, to finish a route, and then have that bus turn around, go the other direction. So we could make it different sizes, but what we've been planning for and what we talked about in the transit master plan is essentially, like I said, just that room for at least 2 buses to be able to park at the same time, and a break room space.
And the history and more detail on all these things would be in the transit master plan, which is on the city website.
Yes. And there's a link, there was a link in the staff report to that.
Seeing as how it's just June here and this will be submitted in January, what are some of the things that need to happen between now and then?
We are definitely looking for more specific estimates from ODOT to hone in the dollar amount that we actually think that we'll have. And other than that, it really just has to go through the process. So after we talk with you here, this will also go to the HB 2017 committee, and it will continue to go on to the TriMet Board of Directors, and then it goes to OTC after that.
Okay. Any other?
Just a quick question. When I was reviewing the packet, well, I guess, first of all, thank you for your presentation. And now I'm going to ask about something that's outside of the presentation. But when I was reviewing the packet, I noticed on the calendar that there was, I think just coming up maybe next week or something, there's a bike repair, a minor bike repair event that's happening. And I believe that we had one at the library a short while ago. And so I started thinking about those sorts of event programming that's done as well, and I wondered, can these funds ever be used for that sort of thing, or is it because those are, I mean, obviously that's a much smaller fund requirement than, you know, the other items that we've talked about. So is that why we don't really see it, or are those funded in a different manner? Can STIF money not be used for that sort of programming? Because it does occur to me that having support for the community to seek different methods of transportation, getting their bike fixed so that they can take their bike, or, you know, everybody has different levels of accessibility to having like the actual tools that we need to getting on that different mode of transportation too. So it's great that we can support those things in the community. And I just wondered if you could talk about some of those projects and that important work that I know SMART does as well, in addition to these items.
Thank you. That's a great question. It's a different funding source that we use. So STIF funding is for transit. It is specifically for transit, so we do need to keep it focused on that. However, we certainly like those other programs as well, and we do have separate funding for it. So the bike mechanic class, or the minor bike repair class that was to teach people how to do their own minor bike repairs, as well as the bike mechanic who can come and fix other people's bikes for them they don't have to have any special expertise. Both of those are funded through programming that we do that is funded through Metro. So it's also, that is federal funding that comes as a pass-through through Metro. And it is absolutely to address the issues that there are different kinds of transportation, different transportation options that we want to make available to people. So that is literally through our transportation options funding through Metro. So yes, they're both grant funding, different pots of money.
Okay, so if this is more focused on the transit, so people getting it on and off the buses, things like, I know there's programming that's assistance for people. How do I ride the bus? How do I find the connection? I don't feel comfortable loading my bike on the bus to take it, or, you know, all of those sorts of things. And SMART has provided assistance and just kind of some hand holding for, you know, here's the first time you're going to do it, and we're here to back you up and help you through it. Is that sort of thing covered by STIF funding, or does that come through the Metro funds that you just
another
discussed?
Funding source.
That's another one. Okay.
That's 5310 federal funding, which we do receive directly from FTA, the Federal Transit Administration. It's section 50. That's why it's called 5310, is the section number in the government funding. So we get a very small pot of money due to our size, and so what we receive is difficult for us to use for, say, funding a bus. We literally receive about $40,000 a year, so we'd have to pile together some of that money. So we use it for travel training, which is...
Travel training, that's the term.
Training.
Yeah, okay.
For helping people, particularly older adults and people with disabilities, with learning how to ride the bus.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so, but that helps explain why we're not seeing that on some of these projects that we're looking at tonight. So thank you. Thanks for that explanation.
As a sidebar, though, I'm really glad you brought that up regarding like the bikes and some of the other programs, because once we have the TOD built, there will definitely be an increase in need. Do you see some of that being covered in that transit center that you're going to have in the TOD?
Do I think that some
You'll
of the
have programs like that at the TOD? Yeah.
We could certainly have them, just to, it's totally sidebar, but you got me there. Yeah, you got me there, but that's okay. Just, I see Dwight in the back of the room, so just add that to your list. We're very excited about the TOD. We're very excited about what it means for the transit center and what it means for bringing people to Wilsonville. So yes, we do hope to have programming that kind of coincides with what people are doing there. And yes, and we did just last week, I suppose, we've opened new bike lockers that are electronically locking, so they're much more modern. And that was in anticipation of the TOD coming, knowing that there might be more people coming through there.
And the TOD meaning the transit-oriented development, correct?
Thank you.
Yeah, and those bike lockers, because I think we had a picture of some of them in the packet, that they are fully covered. So if it rains in the middle of the day when you're wherever, your bike is staying dry and secure and all of those sorts of things too. So that looks like a great addition for our city. Thank you.
Kelsey, I had a quick question. Thank you for your report. Under your new projects that are being proposed, it says bus stop amenities to improve access to transit. Can you describe that to us a little bit, please?
Yes, so many locations, many bus stops in town simply have a pole that says you can catch the bus here. There are some locations that we might find more people stopping there, and we want to have more space for people to sit down or, have shelter from the weather. Some locations, as they get more popular, we might want to have a bus stop display sign. So it's those electronic signs that say next bus is coming in 3 minutes. The one after that is coming in, 18 minutes. Those kinds of additional amenities. So it could be something as simple as this stop will now have the 2-seaters so that someone can sit down and one other person can sit down, and it has a trash can. Or it could be something as elaborate as the electronic signs and a new bus stop pad and a shelter. Mm-hmm.
Looks like we've covered all of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So that brings us to our next and last item for the work session, the Frog Pond East and South Master Plan Development Code, which is, if I knew the number of the chapter of this discussion, it would be pretty high.
This is the final episode.
Okay.
Dan Pauly, Planning Manager. And yes, it's maybe not as many episodes as The Simpsons, but we're getting up there between City Council and Planning Commission.
And the good news is people can go back and watch all of them if they want
Yes.
to, just like The Simpsons.
So on that note, I do want to just acknowledge where we are. We had our final work session with the Planning Commission last week and got some good feedback from them. And I just want to note that as we discuss this today, while we've been through a lot, we've worked through a lot of iterations, we're in a place, a good place overall that, we're still welcoming input and there is still a possibility for changes. I don't anticipate substantial changes, but, we'll continue to refine. And as the final adoption package comes forward to you, we will make clear any of those additional refinements that may happen after this work session. So really, in your packet, I'm happy to answer any questions about specific things in your packet. I know a couple have been emailed to me. Happy to address those in more detail here as well. But I wanted to really focus on a few things where it was more than just refinements to the language to make more clear, something like that, where there was actually a policy shift or more development of policy. And these have all, again, been vetted by the internal team, as well as have been through the Planning Commission and have their support. Thank you. I will share screen. So the first item I'd highlight is something that was still in the work last time we met, was the definition of a live-work unit, particularly as we talk about that commercial Main Street. That's a component of this is called for in the master plan, and has the comprehensive plan designation of commercial. There's two different definitions that have been supported by staff and the Planning Commission to really give some flexibility, but also ensure that there is that dedicated commercial space during initial development of this area. So all these areas, so live work is a term, you've seen it talked about some in the town center, you've also seen it in projects in Villebois. And really as it's been implemented and is commonly understood in kind of a Wilsonville context, is that it's really flex space that could be commercial or residential. It does require a commercial storefront, but it doesn't need to be physically divided, so that whole space may be used for commercial for a time. Someone may have an office in the front, or residential. It may be all residential. It could be converted to full commercial in the future or initially, but generally this is something that exists in residentially zoned land, and we consider it a residentially zoned use.
Dan.
Yes.
I had to step away and come back and reread this after regarding live-work unit versus work-live unit. Can you, now I'm not seeing it here, a work-live unit in the differentiation between the two. Are we including work-live units?
So essentially, to be more clear in our code, we determined not to use the term work-live.
So should we remove that from the changes? Because it
Yeah, I can use.
Do you see that? Oh, that's on page 4.
Yeah, I think because some other jurisdictions have used that work-live nomenclature for these types of units, but I can clarify that.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, because I started looking for, well, where is a work-live unit? Because we're talking about live-work.
Right.
And so, yeah, I just say that there will be no work-live units within.
Yeah, really the work-live units are these business integrated dwelling units.
There was another page referencing that.
He can just do a search on that term and just.
I'd just make sure it was clarified whenever it's in use within this packet.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely.
So may I just, to clarify that, so there are two really densely worded pages. I've got page 4, I haven't found which page the other one is right now, but I'm understanding that do you want to define it because other cities use it and then say how we're going to use it? So what's the
purpose
you know what
is
I'm saying? How much do we need to have in this?
So the purpose is to define it, so when it comes to this area, we're clear with the development community what's expected.
Because they'll find it described in other cities.
So that, so I think I hear what you're saying, Mayor, because we want to make very clear that what it is not.
Correct.
Okay.
So we have to say something about it. Right. Okay.
Yeah, so it does get wordy because there's some nuance here, because not only are there these live-work units and what we're calling the business integrated dwelling units, there's also what you'd consider like a home occupation or home business, and really need clarity in the code. What's the difference between all of those?
I'm just going to comment on that, what you're talking about generally, because while this is an extremely detailed packet, which we need, it does, in the end, I hope, achieve what you're trying, I think it does, but we're trying to eliminate ambiguity and people going down rabbit holes and getting mixed up on definitions.
Yeah.
But it takes some words.
Yeah, and that brings up another comment that I had on it's not clarified, but it's the first paragraph under your table on page 4. When you define the live-work dwelling unit, you say that It has the front facade, commercial type storefront. But then it also says that it will have no kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, closet, or storage adjacent to the front facade. So does that mean that there will be none of those within that first floor?
No, it's just meaning you can't, the idea is that your windows aren't essentially, you don't have a bathroom against your storefront that you have
Oh, got it.
blanked
Okay.
out.
Yeah.
right?
Okay, good. I'm glad. Okay,
So essentially, it's your great room or your office that's along that front
right. You can't.
storefront. That's,
We've seen examples in other communities where they've used an area that should have been used for commercial that they turned into the entry to the restroom.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Then that's not allowed. Okay, good. Good catch.
So really, the key difference here is that generally in commercial, we allow up to 50% of the ground floor, I mean, that goes through any commercial zone, to be residential. And we expect that any live-work units developed will be residential for quite a period, if not in perpetuity. So really the question then is, for that other 50%, how much residential do we want to allow? So this idea of the work-live or business integrated dwelling unit is where there is dedicated walled-off commercial space that cannot be used for residential. That's the majority of the space, but that you are able to have to support housing for either the proprietor or their employee to have housing connected to it. So that's the idea, to add that flexibility, which can be beneficial for needed housing, but also to make sure that we are getting that dedicated commercial space. So that is the approach that we're recommending. I know this is different than what we've talked, than has been done elsewhere, so happy to answer any questions.
So I do have a question on that. So particularly on the BIDU. So if you're saying that it cannot ever be, that cannot be used as residential, correct? So if, theoretically, if you were to find that there's no commercial market for it, you would have difficulty convincing whether it's a buyer or a renter to occupy that space because they couldn't temporarily use that as an extension of their residential.
That's correct.
Does that create a potential disadvantage, like in a down market? I think about a risk assessment, and I'm thinking about a place over in Durham over by Bridgeport, and these were apartments, but they had the live work. And because it took much longer to get, whether it was a hair salon or an accounting business or whatever it was, for someone to say, hey, I want to occupy that, they actually were able to convert them into all residential until they were ideal as a business, but they were able to use them as all residential until they were able to get the business in there.
Yeah, so we've done market studies, we've gone about this. That's a lot easier to do when you have residentially designated land that you're allowing commercial into. But essentially, if you allow this to all be residential, you won't have any commercial here, which is something that we've consistently seen as a policy through the concept plan and the master plan.
Yeah.
So allowing all residential here would not be consistent with that policy direction that we've been
Good.
given.
I tend to agree with that, but I just wanted to make sure that you'd done the risk analysis of that.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly we hear from the development community that, the preference, especially where commercial market is now, that there's a preference to do commercial. And we've explored things like, can you force the transition over time? But then you're talking about potentially evicting someone, which we don't really want to be in the position of. So we've looked at this in detail. That's why really we're coming with, we do want to ensure some of this ground floor is commercial when it's developed.
I am really sorry about getting sideways with you on this one, because I'm going to refer back to Villebois and the plaza.
Yeah.
And because that was designated commercial space, right?
Correct.
But there was a fatal flaw. And that fatal flaw was you could never put a restaurant on that corner because there wasn't the capacity in the HVAC system to be able to put
Right, to
the
do the
restaurant.
exhaust, right.
Are we, number one, going to allow the developer to put like an HVAC system in that you could have like a coffee shop that could cook? Or are there code limitations? And this is really more educating me rather than, because I really don't know the answer to this question. Are we allowing for that where there would be the ability to have a small cafe or something like that, or a coffee shop where they could have a little grill or something like that, or is that completely excluded out of these
No, that would be
spaces?
included here, and I think lessons learned, like, I'm trying to remember the details, but even in the subsequent unbuilt components of the piazza, it's kind of lesson learned, we need to make sure that the HVAC's built, or at least the space is put there where you can install the appropriate venting for that sort of thing, so.
Just to recap that, whatever happened when that was planned, it wasn't, there was no requirement. A requirement would have been useful in order to give that building more potential.
Right, exactly.
Because then you can't later go back and add the hood.
Yeah,
So the requirements were actually probably too low.
yeah, and that was lesson learned, I think, in that case, yeah.
So Dan, I have a quick question. I know that it's a live-work area, but what if somebody did have a commercial use that they wanted to use the entire space as commercial and not 50% as live space?
So essentially how it works is and this is generally in all commercially zoned land, is you can have up to 50% of the ground floor non-commercial. So if you have 75% commercial, there's nothing wrong with that. That's compliance with the code. So they're not required to have 50% live work.
Got it. Thank you.
On the ground floor, or essentially being those live work being residential units.
So one more question about the live work units. What has observations been in areas that have these live work units as far as, there's, when it changes hands, when it's a new owner or a new renter or somebody's occupying the building, are they usually set up or developed or done in a way that percentage can easily fluctuate when that change happens, or does it kind of get locked in?
Well, there's kind of two components,
get-go.
right? So first of all, it's these live work units, as put in the middle here, are built to, most of them or a portion of is built to meet commercial building codes, which is key to be able to convert to a commercial space, is that it meets the commercial building code. The other component is essentially, as leases expire, can someone interested in converting to commercial consolidate enough tenant spaces of those prior residential units in order to put in, the size they need.
Oh, so they would like gather multiple units and then perhaps remove walls or something and make it a big unit?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But that gets more difficult, and that's true for, anywhere where you have individualized tenant spaces, right? You have to line up those vacancies in order to convert multiple
Or it could just be
spaces.
a small, if
If it was just a small space, then yeah, it'd be a lot more.
Okay. I was just thinking, Councilor Dunwell's comments about, being able to be responsive to the market and what's happening and what the needs are. I was wondering, like, how quickly responsive could those live work units be?
It's really dependent on how long the lease is.
Yep. Okay. Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to follow up on some of Councilor Dunwell's questions because I'm not sure if I see the prohibited uses in that space, in that it looks like it's 50% of that space. But if they actually are using it as a living room how will the city determine that it's not that it is actually commercial space?
So you're talking about the live work or the
Live work.
So live work, it's really flexible. Usually we'd know if it's a commercial operation by the fact whether or not there's an active business license there. But really the live work, it's assumed it's residential and kind of, in a way, it's a pre-approved home occupation where you don't need additional like permitting to do a home occupation that has the commercial storefront already there.
In that one section, it does say that this is differentiated from a home occupation or home business.
In the fact that that it already has that commercial storefront and that it's pre-approved to have a commercial operation in there. Versus a home business or a home occupation, you have to actually, especially a home business, you actually have to go and get a land use approval to have a non-residential use in your home.
It's permitted outright.
It's permitted outright in this case.
Okay.
And you're not going to have to deal with like HOA blowback because you're trying to run a business in a residential area and the
Right.
HOA gets all sideways with you, right?
Right.
Because it's already designated as commercial.
Like an example might be somebody wants to have a daycare, and so they would have they'd be able to have the public come to their storefront where there was daycare.
Right. Ready to go to the next
Okay.
one? Okay. So this builds on this, and we received comments from a number of people about that the list of allowed uses was too short, that there were things like anything from like escape rooms that weren't in the short list of uses. Again, this is a fairly small amount of space we're talking about, so we also didn't want to go like the pages that you might find in Villebois. You have pages of potential uses. So what we used, and has been a pattern that we've used throughout the development of the code, is we'll reference back to other recently updated code in the city that works, that went through a policy conversation with the city. And in this case, we've really referenced back to the town center zone, where you also have this mix of multifamily and commercial. And so the list of uses, we've stayed consistent except where it really doesn't make sense. Like they had like food that really like parking structures and like food cart pods, which don't really make sense in this small commercial space that we're talking about here. So took out some of those things, but other than that, we're permissive of the same list that's permitted in the town center, which is typical of commercial zoning. So really the question here is there any thoughts about this needs to be condensed back down, or is it extensive enough?
I see something that might be missing. Wholesale or kitchen. So for instance, there are boutique kitchens that, you know, they're small kitchens and they're making like products or crafts or whatever it is, and they're reselling that, but it's wholesale. They're, supplying it to some of the local, but they might be doing some cooking or something like that. Would that be excluded?
No. So essentially it'd be like very small scale, like light industrial, where they're actually, or wholesaling.
But that's not included in this
That's not
list?
included, so yeah, that's something we could add.
Yeah.
Or a kitchen where you are like essentially creating, or like a craft or artist, even an artist area where you're creating art and then taking it somewhere else to.
I think about some of the makers who make things like jewelry or whatever that they take to farmers markets or things like that and sell them somewhere else, but not out of their own.
Could that be covered in just the general description of retail sales, or it's different because you're not actually a storefront?
Yeah,
You're making a product for retail sales?
yeah.
But isn't the idea to have pedestrian activity?
Yeah, I think in this case, like certainly in live work, and the live work scenario, it specifically talks about like light industrial where you could have like your studio where you're producing that. I think for these limited commercial space, we're wanting something where customers are actually coming and interacting.
So I couldn't have my artist studio there. I'm not an artist, but.
I mean, you could in the live work area.
I'm an artist, but.
I mean, you could if you, like, someone could walk in and,
A gallery.
a gallery, if you had a component of a gallery.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification.
So I will not get into as much detail on this as I did with the Planning Commission. I just wanted to make you aware, because this is an important component. Again, really, the master plan's about residential and creating and meeting housing need. And the master plan included this whole thing about affordable housing analysis that was a component of the master plan. And there's two ways that we do that in the master plan and then in the development code. The first one is those targeted unit types, that we require certain targeted unit types, including middle housing, the small units, and the mobility ready units. And,
So we can also see urban form type 3. We're seeing the
I do that.
closed caption.
Let me, the way we can pause the closed caption or adjust that.
I do like that we have the closed caption as a new addition. I think that's great, but maybe we should just let all of staff know that there's a bit of a dead space at the bottom of their slides.
We could get rid of this side view of the next slide, perhaps. Like a full slide view, whatever you call it. We don't need the miniature of the next slide.
It'll keep the box the same size.
Okay. We'll see what
Oh,
happens here.
that's the view of us, okay.
So, really just wanted to inform you that something we've done with the iterations, now that we have more
Oh, we
information.
don't have it. We didn't mean to eliminate the closed caption. Sorry.
We'll look at this last line quickly and then closed
And we'll go
captions.
back to it.
So we've looked, so prior we had kind of this model, this spreadsheet model where we'd assumed based on market preference that like single-family homes would be built before this, and depending on the amount of land, there was kind of in that, as we assign numbers out the minimum unit count out, it kind of varied based on some assumptions there. We've simplified that down to where we have just one assumed density for each urban form, which makes the process a lot cleaner and more explainable. But again, with that thought, really, the reason I even put this in here is just to remind council and those listening that we have this minimum unit count of 1,325 that we've kind of spread across the master plan area based on the urban form that was assigned in the master plan. That 1,200, that's our policy, that's the minimum. And we acknowledge that there may be more, but there's not any really policy that requires there to be more. Because obviously, sometimes in the community, there's concerns about how much density will there be. And really the focus has been to create those standards about how large buildings can be, how far apart they should be to create that urban form. And then because then whatever is built within there is allowed. So we don't, because of the urban form, you can't go crazy and go super high because of just the restraints of space. But it may be more than 1,325 units that are built out there. But as a policy, we're not requiring any more than 1,325, if that makes sense. And we've planned, as we think about infrastructure and such, we want to make sure that we build roads that can accommodate a reasonable expectation of additional units. And just as important to understand, because of some of the new regulatory landscape we're working in, that even if there was a maximum amount of units, there's so many units that are exempt from that maximum that essentially it makes it mostly moot, right? So that's why we took this different approach of urban form rather than setting a maximum unit type. But functionally, we don't believe that you could put much more than 1,600 just from a land planning standpoint, but there's no policy pushing towards that 1,600. We've taken that metro requirement and we've spread it out based on the planned urban form with these assumed density, which are based on examples elsewhere in the city of similar type of development, as well as the type of development that we saw laid out in examples we saw from that demonstration plan we did with consultants, as well as what we've seen from some of our development partners. So any questions about that approach? Or
That's a pretty hefty leap from the 6.5, which would be the minimum for urban form type 3, up to 9.
Yeah, it's a balance, and that is a great point. But you consider, and we looked at what kind of lot size that means. You can still do a larger lot size, but because if you have a larger area that's all urban form 3, you're also going to have some sort of like townhouse or cottage. So you're still going to be able to have those larger lots, because it's going to balance out. And at the same time, we wanted to make sure that this, for urban form 1, that 14.5 is, like 14.515 is a threshold we wanted to be careful about, because if you go much above that, you're automatically inadvertently kind of pushing towards multifamily, which is not the intent here, right? I mean, multifamily is allowed, but we're not requiring or encouraging it per se.
I would just make sure that we have full justification for that delta.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we've
and just
looked at
make
that.
sure we've got that note so that somebody can look back on that and understand why that change happened. You probably have that already, though.
Yeah. But in the end, the math actually works out, and we get it all spread out in a way that can be developed. One other new component, which isn't new, it's in the master plan, is we've provided more detail about a gateway to the main street, which the idea is having a focal point where, meet me at where it really draws that attention to this commercial area on the main street. That's in the master plan, so we put some more parameters and guidance in the development code for developers to ensure that component comes to fruition. And I will leave it at that. Happy to talk about any of those components I just highlighted or anywhere else, or take any guidance of things you'd like to see further refined as we get this finished up.
I have a question about this. I think I saw that the facade is on the street, correct? So the entrances to the commercial properties would be on that, on the Brisbane, on the
Correct.
street side. But the parking is in the back. So does that mean that people wanting to get into those spaces will have to walk all the way around to the other side of the building?
Yeah, that's typical of kind of a more Main Street design. I mean, more generally throughout the country.
And So and they're all ADA compliant, so that people who park in the back and have to walk around or mobile.
Yeah, so I mean, there could be ADA spaces marked on the street, and in some of these scenarios, that does occur.
Okay.
Because that's the closest space. So as the building code dictates, ADA spaces could be marked in the public right of way as the closest space to the entrance.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments? I won't go into real detail here, but I just wanted to say that I appreciate the time that the Planning Commission, staff, and the council, probably the staff most, has spent on looking for ways to, it doesn't look like it was so many words, but looking for ways to reduce steps and what people call red tape and cut out some redundancies. I think some of that has been achieved here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've tried to put the necessary detail and leave out the unnecessary detail. It's never perfect, but we're.
But I see some cases where we've made it better.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry, one other small minor question. On page 28 of our packet, this was page 18 of the item or whatever, there was, let's see, this part about this minor edit provides more clarity on where alternative design standards are provided, thus citywide standards do not apply. Includes being clear of all the standards that do apply in Frog Pond East and South. And then under point 1 there, it says that subsection C1 does not apply to the village zone or Frog Pond West neighborhood. So it's calling out both of those because they have their own variety standards, right? Which
Right.
That all made sense to me. And then I thought, what about Old Town Wilsonville? Don't they have their own design guide
Yes. they
thing
do.
as well? Should that also be mentioned in that?
No, the reason
One?
being is the standards you're reading through are for multifamily development.
And they don't have any of those sections.
And the Old Town zone only allows single-family and middle housing. It
Yeah.
does not allow new multifamily development in Old Town.
Okay. Thank you. That explains why.
Yeah. I had the same thought, but then I'm like, oh yeah, multifamily's not allowed there, so. I will mention one area that I've received additional comments on, both internally and from development partners as a group, is stormwater standards. So we're meeting internally to kind of look at some of that again. So that may be an area you may see some additional changes in the final adoption package.
Oh, to make that more clear, I think.
How to make that more clear
Yeah.
and measurable.
And just to recap, there are federal stormwater standards and state stormwater standards. And we talked about this earlier, and then people want to have shade trees, and there are lots of things that we want to have in these areas. But
Yes.
sometimes you're talking about putting too many things in one geographic location. So
Correct.
that's what you were trying to achieve with those stormwater standards is guidance so that,
Yes, and how much of what type of design, because, you want the low-impact development, you want it treated, you want it integrated into the site and treated as close to the source as possible. To
source of stormwater.
The source of stormwater. So how much of that can you get close to the site while being able to still enable the rest of the type of development that you want? So that's a bit of a balancing act.
And this came about, I remember, from one case where it would have been nice to have more shade trees, but you couldn't fit them in with all the requirements for the stormwater.
Yeah, and you think, well, can you put the trees in the stormwater planter? You can't, you technically can, but then usually through maintenance, because that soil gets the metals from the street and stuff, you have to replace that media in the storm planter every decade or so, to keep the function, that means you have to take the tree out too. So,
Okay.
so it doesn't really work to have the tree and the storm planner generally.
We're still working on that.
Yes.
Looks like we've covered it. Thank you.
Okay, and again, if you want to have individual meetings or have areas you want to explore more, happy to take the time.
Well, I
with
do
you.
have a question on that one, in particular that you just mentioned, more work is being done to research that, and maybe there's another one. What is the time frame for us to see that?
So we'll share it as soon as we have it available.
Okay, just piece by piece.
Certainly, you'll see it. There'll be a package that goes, because Planning Commission is having their public hearing on the 10th of July.
Okay.
So there'll be a package that goes with that, so we can share that with the council well ahead of their August hearing as well and address any of your questions.
Okay. All right, well, if there are no other questions, we will.
No,
go ahead.
I do want to make a comment really quick. Dan, just kudos and accolades for the expertise that you've brought to this process. You have truly shown the value of the tenure that you have on this team in being able to work through some of the issues before anyone else has thought about them. So not only for yourself, but for the rest of your team, on behalf of the council, I'd really like to thank you for all the effort you put forth.
Welcome, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll adjourn our work session and reconvene at 7 PM for our regular council meeting. Call to order a meeting of the Wilsonville City Council for our meeting on Monday, June 17th, 7:01 p.m. Will the city recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Berry.
Present.
Councillor Linville.
Here.
Council President Ockervall. Here. Councillor Dunwell.
Here.
Mayor Fitzgerald.
Here. Will everyone please join us and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Council President Ockervall, may I have a motion to approve the following order of agenda?
Yes, I move to approve the following order of agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Starting with mayor's business, since our last city council meeting on June 3rd, I have some activities to update the council and public on, and some of us were at some of the same events. Last week, in fact, along with city councilors Ockervall and Linville, I attended the Oregon Department of Aviation's open house event for the Aurora State Draft Master Plan. And that purpose of that open house, it was one of the steps in the master planning process, and it was held at the North Marion High School. I don't have the count of people, but there must have been over 100 because they ran out of comment cards, and they said they printed 100. I got there about halfway through, and they had a number of stations where you could go and talk to engineers and planners and ask questions, see the different options they're looking at, and so forth. In some ways, I would say it looks disappointing because it looks like there's already a predetermined outcome. That's what I learned going through that, asking questions, favoring airport expansion, and probably in at least two directions, width and length. So, really, I think the airport is a real asset for our community. Both of my parents were private pilots, and I know that there are so many important uses for an airport like that for people who live at long distances and businesses and so forth. And so we really need that function for light aircraft pilots traveling in our area. And we need those for the small aircraft, especially that carry 2 to 6 passengers, in addition to bigger regional airports and, airports like PDX. But all of them, of course, need to be safe for the pilots, the passengers, the airport crews, and the neighbors. I was just thinking about this because I can't imagine anybody who doesn't agree with that we have the Oregon Department of Aviation, and we have the FAA, who we depend on to make sure that we have safe airports for all the uses. But considering how close, these are just some of my observations, how close the Aurora State Airport is to PDX, McMinnville, Salem, and Hillsborough airports, I still wonder why this particular airport, called the Aurora State Airport, which was built for small aircraft, needs to expand to a different type of aircraft for large, expensive jets, accessible mainly to a small portion of our population. I'm just trying to figure out still how that is justified, because some of the plans we looked at in that open house are going to require things like moving a highway, moving the control tower, building new roads. In other fields, in particular, one that I've worked in, which is healthcare, hospitals are not, they're a public facility, and they're not allowed to be built just anywhere because it's inefficient on so many different levels, including safety, level of specialty, expertise, and certainly for fiscal responsibility. So in the healthcare system, which I'm familiar with, I know they use a certificate of need system to determine how densely we should locate hospitals. And how that system is not used for airports, I know that, but I wonder what system does determine how densely Oregon is populated with airports for commercial jets that carry 8 to 20 or more passengers. And I don't know if there is a system, but my belief is if we don't speak up and if we're not heard, we might find out that we don't have a say in that. And I believe from what I know, public airports are funded through a number of sources: fuel tax, landing fees, probably rent for hangars and so forth, and also through our tax dollars from the FAA. The Oregon Department of Aviation receives a lot of its funding through the fuel tax on the fuel that it sells at its state airports to Oregon pilots. So now let's move to another topic that I was in a meeting about today. We go to a lot of meetings about these things, and that is moving from airports to roads, because when you go to that open house and you look at some of the alternatives, it actually includes moving a highway. And I asked, would the FAA pay to move that highway? How is that going to be done? And I'm not sure they were prepared to answer that. I don't think I got the answer yet. But if that is an eventuality that does happen, I wonder if the FAA is going to give our impoverished Oregon Department of Transportation the money to cover all of that. And of course, it takes staff, engineers, and all kinds of people to make these things work. There is an article that I just read in a Salem newspaper about the what they call the Transportation Road Show, I think is the nickname for it. So it's the Oregon State legislators, Transportation Committee are going around the state and holding public meetings, presenting information and asking for feedback. And if you look up these articles and listen to any legislator who's on that committee, as I've read in the media, they will say that, and I really can identify with this, because we have talked about tolling so much in this area, and we've talked about where's this money going to come from, how are we going to pay for the Boone Bridge, because it's in our backyard. But if you talk to other people in other parts of the state, they have not talked about it. And so there is ODOT has stated that right now they have a $1.8 billion shortfall every year for working on our roads. And so I just really have to wonder if we're going to suddenly switch and magically move a highway and create a new highway, new roads to accommodate an expanded airport, where is that money going to come from? I want to refer you, if anybody wants to write this down, to a short website that tells you about the ODOT transportation funding problems. You write down the word tinyurl, tinyurl.com/ODOT gap. So all Oregonians are going to need to, one way or another, we're going to be taxed to pay for our road system because there just isn't enough money. So given that, and we don't know how that's going to be, that is the legislature looking at that, and I'm sure everybody will be invited to meetings. No one knows the answer. But we know that more money needs to be brought to the table. So with all of that, it still seems really strange to me, given that we have no promise of federal funds to replace the Boone Bridge. ODOT has told us that Boone Bridge is the way it was built, when it was built, with wooden pilings and so forth, that it will fail in a 9.0 earthquake. But right now, we don't know how it's going to be paid for, and the price tag just keeps going up. It was $600 million. I think I saw something about it being $8 million now, because as we know, everything keeps costing more and more and more. The reason I'm bringing up our road transportation is, if we're thinking about expanding this Aurora airport, knowing how close it is to Salem, how do we decide which Oregon road projects to put aside in order to accommodate attracting more larger jets at this Aurora State Airport? And I want to ask, why are they not considering using the Salem Airport? It is just a beautiful airport. It's had all kinds of upgrades. It has the safety. It has incredible parking. It needs more business, and it's very close by. I think it would be a great alternative, and I hope we hear about it as an alternative. But what I believe I learned at this open house is that the Aurora Airport needs to expand its width in order to add a level of safety that is needed. That seems to be absolutely necessary. They don't know yet which direction they will expand it in terms of width. And in order to accommodate at least 500 touch-and-go landings or landings and takeoffs of these jets that carry 8 to 20 or more passengers, is my understanding that it looks like they believe they need to expand that length by at least 500 yards. So you're going to hear more about this from Councilor Linville, but I think it's the area, I think it really is important to think about where is the money going to come from and where is it going to be applied. This last weekend, I attended with Councilor Berry the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee's annual retreat, and this is a meeting of the cities in Clackamas County, and it's a good group of people that look at common problems. Transportation and housing are the main issues. Each city has a different angle on those problems, but there are certain ways that we've found to get better results by learning from each other and in some cases working together and also having custom solutions where there's not a consensus. And I think Councilor Berry will talk more about the transportation session. On Saturday, we mainly focused on housing, which has been a top priority for our governor. And we also looked at what, in terms of housing, the common thing that everyone talked about in all of the cities is the public infrastructure meeting, water, sewer, streets, sidewalks, needed to support housing and job development, because cities just can't magically build all that. You can have the idea that you want to do it, but that does not mean you're going to be able to afford it. And so there's a lot of discussion of what could these Clackamas cities do together to communicate that to the governor. In Wilsonville, one of the ways that we have done that since 1990, and some of the other cities have as well, but I know it's been very successful in Wilsonville, is we have used urban renewal since 1990. The year 2000 plan and the West Side plan have made it possible for us to build infrastructure for housing and also for example, the area where Mentor Graphics was, that is now Siemens, was attractive for that amazing development because we had some of the infrastructure started. So we'll see what comes up in the next year and so forth through those counties, and actually between now and the end of the year, or those cities in Clackamas County developing some messaging on how they could be enabled to be more successful in adding some housing. Today, I went to a meeting of the Washington County Coordinating Committee. This is Washington County. We just have a little bit of area in Washington County, but we do go to that, and they approved project fundings for City of Tualatin and Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District out of the funds available. And we also heard, most of the meeting was about an update on City of Sherwood's Urban Growth Boundary Expansion Concept Plan, which is pretty extensive, and you can read more about that on the City of Sherwood website. And they are the only metro area city at this point that is seeking an expansion of their urban growth boundary during this cycle of the UGB consideration. So I don't think we would expect to see any other expansions this late in the game of this session. For upcoming meetings, I'm wearing my Juneteenth t-shirt. The city's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee has organized the city's 4th annual Juneteenth celebration, and it's going to be held Wednesday, June 19th from 5 to 7 p.m. at Town Center Park. And it's a free, family-friendly activity that commemorates the ending of slavery in the United States. The event includes some speeches, food, music, and crafts. And specifically, Juneteenth, as I'm sure you all know, is short for June 19th. It marks the day in 1865 when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, to take control of the state and ensure that all enslaved people be freed. And that their arrival came a full 2.5 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. It ends the It honors the end of slavery in the United States and is considered the longest-running African-American holiday. So, and on June 17, 2021, it officially became a federal holiday. This year's theme for the event is Freedom to Create and Contribute, and it features a keynote, I mentioned this at our last meeting, but by Kimberly Howard Wade, and she's the executive director of Caldera Arts, which is a youth program and camp facility that empowers and inspires at-risk youth through art, environment, and mentoring. And they support creatives and cultural workers. They build skills and relationships in that field. So we invite everybody to go to that. We also are expecting KMHD radio station's DJ Bryson Wallace to be spinning some music, and some community partners will be there as well. Food will be provided by Cafe Yum while supplies last, so get there early. We appreciate their support. And they're having a number of games, and really the celebration is a great time to bring people together and make new friends, and a chance to reflect on the progress that we've already made towards racial equality and justice, and looking forward to what more can be done. Big event is coming up on June 29th. That is the Korean War Memorial Ceremony and grand opening of the Korean War Memorial Interpretive Center. Hope we can get a great turnout at that event. It's long awaited. It was really slowed down by the COVID and other interruptions that got in the way, really because of the COVID supply chain problem. And it is, so on June 29th, we will have the opening ceremony for the Korean War Memorial Interpretive Center, and it starts at 10 a.m. in Town Center Park with the Korean War Remembrance Ceremony, followed by the grand opening. Speakers include Republic of Korea General Consul Enjai So, Congresswoman Andrea Salinas, and high-ranking state officials. We've often had, I expect we will have a number of our Korean War and other war veterans at the event who come to the other events we've had at the Korean War Memorial, and I hope everybody can join to welcome them and honor them. So it's really a signature event for our community, and also a solemn one to honor Americans and Oregonians who have served in defense of a free and democratic Republic of Korea. So this project, I want to say, what you're going to see is a project that has been led by the Korean War Veterans Association Oregon Trail Chapter and the Korean War Memorial Foundation of Oregon. It's not a city project. It's led by these two groups, and they put a tremendous amount of time into it. It showcases the stories of over 90 Oregon Korean War veterans using a number of media, video, flipbooks, and photos. There's a topographical map that outlines famous Korean War battles and battle lines. Visitors can read the stories of the Allies who came to the aid of South Korea, and also read about first of the Korean War. So I think my last items that I have to mention are that, no, I think someone else is announcing that. So I think I have covered all of my items, and please note that our next City Council meeting is scheduled for Monday, July 15th, starting at 7 p.m. We've canceled the July 1st meeting due to proximity of the July 4th holiday week. So that brings me to, we don't have anyone for communications today, do we?
Did anybody sign up for the speaker?
I think we're talking about communications, not citizen.
Communication section. Okay, anyone signed up for citizen input and community announcements on Zoom or otherwise? Okay, then I won't need to read this. I'll move straight to councilor comments, liaison reports, and meeting announcements. Sorry that the mayor's report was so long.
Okay.
Now we'll move to Council President Aukervall.
There's a lot going on, it's fine. First, I just wanted to note a big congratulations to all of our area, all of the Wilsonville graduates from this last week. We have a number of graduates in our city, both from high school, and of course we got to remember Clackamas Community College and OIT and all of our educational partners. So big congratulations to them all. Since our last council meeting, I attended the Regional Water Providers Consortium meeting, and we received a presentation on legislature around cybersecurity standards for the water sector, as well as PFAS, I'm not going to be able to do that acronym, but it's PFAS, the forever chemical, from the American Water Works Association. And on our consent agenda, we have an item to accept the amended IGA with the Regional Water Providers Consortium, which the city is a member of. And this group provides leadership for planning, management, stewardship, resiliency of drinking water, specifically with an emphasis on emergency preparedness and resiliency, water conservation, regional coordination. So we'll see that. Also on consent, we have an item to adopt the canvas of votes, which I will support with a yes vote. And I certainly believe in the authenticity of these numbers. And I'm also trying to interpret what they mean. I've noted that this election had a very low turnout. I think it was only 38%, 35% Washington County from the registered voters, and also that the local ballot measures had a lot of undervotes, which means that several hundred people that did cast their ballots did not vote on all of the ballot measures. So within this context of a very low turnout and even fewer votes considering the undervotes, the advisory measure specifically asking about the urban renewal district and town center, it was quite close, nearly 50-50 or less than 0.5% with a no to yes. So I think many people supported this concept. Some people had concerns. And I personally would like to learn about those concerns and better understand them. I would like to have factual information clarified. I personally am concerned about a lot of the inaccurate information that bubbled up in the community in the last several months. And as a decision maker, it's important to me to listen to our community and also use all of the facts to make decisions that are going to benefit the community as a whole. So in my view, Wilsonville it's not a community that just sits by and doesn't do anything, just lets things sit. I don't think that we want our town center to become stale. And the recent trajectory in the town center area is concerning to me. I think that we want to support a place for local business and public places for people to come together. And I think that we might need to bring folks together now to learn some more. I think this has always been a strength for Wilsonville. You know, the elements in the town center plan came from the community. We literally had thousands of responses from the community that went into that plan, and their voices helped establish the visions and the goals, the priorities, the preferences for a main street and the emerald chain, this concept of having connected parks and promenades and the multimodal transportation, the buildings, the streetscapes, designs, you name it. I think, as this council knows, so we all know this, the plan was adopted in July of 2019, right? July 16th. So it's part of our comprehensive plan. The plan is in place, but we have this question now of how are we going to generate funds to jumpstart development in the area, and over the next several decades, not just immediately, but over the next several decades. And we need to figure out how to fund the public infrastructure, those like the needed water improvements and the sewer and the sidewalks and, changing the streets and all of this public infrastructure that's needed to realize that planned vision. So to me, doing nothing to investigate or invest in our community, it doesn't feel like an option to me. So I am hoping that staff could help support council with bringing the community together to better understand the different funding alternatives, presenting factual information regarding the concerns that we heard about the urban renewal, and so we can all decide how to move forward. And I've kind of gone on now a bit, but that I wanted to reflect on that. And then finally, I also wanted to note that I plan on attending the July 29th commemoration at Town Center Park. And I think we're very proud to have this new center opening in our Town Center Park area, to have the war memorial there and the opportunity to honor the many folks and their sacrifices. So I hope you can come and join. And that's it for me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Linville.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start with, on Friday, June 7th, we held a opioid settlement community meeting with our social service providers, representative from Clackamas County, and TVFNR. And we had a really good meeting, and this was discussing how to use our opioid settlement money directly provided to the city of Wilsonville. And so we went away with giving our city attorney a little bit more work to do to bring back some information. We are interested in finding out how some of our neighboring communities are using their money. We are also looking at the possibility of using some of those funds for peer support people to work along with our behavioral health employee. So some really exciting kinds of discussion. And so we will meet again the end of July. So we're moving, we'll hopefully come back at some point with a recommendation to the council.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, certainly.
I didn't give you advance notice on this, but do you have an initial amount of money that we will work with?
Well, the city manager can correct me if I'm wrong, but we think that it's around $50,000. Yeah.
Thanks.
That's money that has accumulated over a number of years, so it's not money that we would receive every year. But we also have a 5-year window to spend that money and have some reporting requirements. And then on Tuesday, June the 11th, I attended as the city representative to the Planning Advisory Committee for the Aurora Airport Master Planning process. And we were all very surprised at the beginning of the meeting. Our packet materials provided 7 alternatives. And the beginning discussion of the purpose of the meeting was to discuss the alternatives. The very first alternative discussed was the possibility of do nothing. And that option, as well as reducing the airport to a B2 level, which was in 3 of the options, those were immediately taken off the possibility of alternatives. And they reason that they were is that it was explained to the PAC that the FAA had looked at the alternatives and determined that none of those were possible because in their estimation, the airport is already a C2 airport. And what I didn't understand, which I think is an important thing to understand, is that the FAA doesn't make that designation. The Oregon Department of Aviation doesn't make that designation. It is actually the pilots who are flying the aircraft that are considered C2 or above. And when they that they believe that they can safely land at the Aurora Airport, and so they fly in and out of that airport. We actually have some D-level aircraft that are also flying in and out of that airport on a regular basis. And when the numbers of flights reaches a certain threshold, then the FAA says they are forced to change the designation of the airport to correspond with the aircraft that are flying in and out. And there are a number of deficiencies that currently exist at the airport, regardless of whether they were a B2 or a C2, which is what they say the airport is. And those need to be corrected over the next 20 years and have to be included in the master plan. So it was a little bit of a shock, I think. It was to me as a PAC member to immediately have those alternatives that were provided by the consultants immediately taken off of consideration. We were informed about the remaining 4 alternatives, and at the Thursday, June 13 Aurora open house, only those 4 alternatives were presented, and all of them offer an increase in the runway length of 500 feet. And there are different configurations of that. And my understanding from the staff at ODAV is that there will be additional alternatives that will be developed and presented. So I am going to encourage, as the mayor said, there were I think the staff for the consulting firm did not think that very many people would show up, but we have communities that are very concerned about what is going on at the airport, and they came in numbers. And very early in the evening, they ran out of the comment forms, and they gave 2 other options after some encouragement to actually have people record their comments on the tablet, a tablet that they had there, and then also they put the form, the comment form on the easels with dots, so people could put dots on. But I think there were a number of people who attended who did not know that there were the ability to give comments, and there were also people who did not have an opportunity. So I am, the window for providing opportunity and reviewing the alternatives is, ends this Sunday on the 23rd. And so I am encouraging any of our citizens that have feedback on the alternatives to complete the form. And it's online, and so I'm going to just briefly tell how to get to it in the easiest way. If you Google, rather than giving you a URL number, although it is on our website for you, on the city's website, if you Google the Oregon Department of Aviation, and once you get there, you click on the Aurora Master Plan Project website, and it says click here. And then when you get to there, you'll have the ability to review the preliminary alternatives handout. So you'll be able to look at all 4 of the options. And then once you've done that, then click on Submit Your Comments by June 23rd. That doesn't look like a hot link, but it is, and it'll take you to the form. And so please, if you have concerns or you would like to provide input, please take that opportunity to do so. Yes.
I don't usually do this, but I wonder, just for the sake of explanation, Councilor Linville, would you mind giving a little bit of illustration of, if you can, again, I don't know that you brought your gigantic reference manual here, but the difference between a B-type airport, the C2, and the D, just some
Well,
description.
it has to do with the, obviously, the size of the aircraft, the weight of the aircraft, and the wingspan of the aircraft. So we have, for instance, a fairly good-sized commercial Gulfstream aircraft that is a D level. That is actually, it's actually hangared at the Aurora Airport. And it's questionable about whether there's a long enough runway for that to safely land and take off. But I am told by the FAA that that's a pilot decision. They decide based on their payload, their fuel, their passengers, the weather, the conditions about whether it's safe to land or not. And I think convenience has something to do with it as well. So,
And the C2.
and the C2 aircraft is a, it's easy to look these up.
Okay.
You can look at them online, and you just Google. It's Roman numerals, so it's C-Roman numeral 11.
Okay.
And that's how you can look at them. But they are a smaller commercial aircraft. None of these have to do with helicopters. They're all airplanes, and so the FAA has said that we have at least 500 annual flights of aircraft that are C2 and above, and although there's some questions about that data. And what will be done at the next PAC meeting is that we're going to look very closely and take a deeper dive into the methodology that the FAA used to come up with those numbers.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it was a little disconcerting because all of the 4 options just gave the public who were there to comment, it gave them nothing but the alternative to increase the runway by 500 feet, either to the north or to the south, or to move the runway to the east, or make changes to the Hubbard Highway if it was going to remain where it is. So the input was limited, but the questionnaire allows people to provide their input. So I am going to, upcoming things, I am also going to attend the Juneteenth celebration on this Wednesday from 5 to 7. Looking forward to that, and especially the speaker that will be there, and the Korean War Remembrance Ceremony on the 29th at 10 a.m. I have an opioid settlement prevention and treatment and recovery board meeting on July the 10th. And I wanted to just remind people, I don't know whether it was reported by anybody else, but just a reminder that July 4th at 8 o'clock is our city laser light show. And
good point.
And so just encourage families to bring their whole gang out to the laser light show. And Your Honor, that's my report.
Thank you. Councilor Berry.
Well, I just want to take along what Councilor Ackerville said about the town center renewal vote and all of the votes, that it was a really low turnout with the voters, which is always a little disappointing, and that, I really value everybody's vote, and that I think it's really important, whether it's a regular November election or an election in between. And I fully support what she said about, investigating why, people had concerns about the town center renewal proposal, because we do need funding for the infrastructure in order to attract development. And maybe we need to get a better message of what the urban renewal tool is. I'm not quite sure, but I think that's something that we should have future discussions on. And then I wanted to talk about, I attended on Thursday, June 6th in the afternoon, the Housing Our Future Task Force, our first meeting, and Councilor Denwell was the chair of it. She did a really awesome job running the meeting. The main thing that we did was we discussed the project overview, the schedule, what buildable land inventory is, what our housing market and needs forecasts are, who the stakeholders are. So it was the first of a few more meetings that are coming up, and I look forward to continuing that discussion. And then this past weekend on Friday and Saturday, along with the mayor and some staff, we attended the Clackamas County C4 retreat. And on Friday afternoon, the focus was transportation. I thought that the meeting was well represented with all the cities were represented with a few districts and other agencies too, that we did have the co-chairs of the joint committee from the state on transportation come and held a discussion on the road show that they've been doing across the state to get input on transportation funding. I think what works really well for this C4 committee is that we've put together a value statement, and that we're all, even though we come from different perspectives, like you had said, and have different key issues, we have similar values. And so when issues come up, like tolling has in the past, that we're able to have good discussions and come up with a united communications to the Department of Transportation and to the state capitol, and that we're looking forward to putting together an update on our values and what the key issues are. It seems like funding is a really big deal. We need to get funding for the Boones Bridge, and it would be nice to extend this the west down to Salem. So those were key topics that were discussed, and I thought it was a great opportunity for networking. Last year was my first year to attend the C4 meeting, and I walked in a newbie, didn't know the location where it was being held, didn't know any of the people who were there, was new to a lot of the subjects, and this time arrived and I was familiar where the retreat was being held, walked into the room and I recognized all our neighboring city representatives and agencies, and was really familiar with the topics, and that was a good feeling. That it makes me feel more prepared to continue to be on the city council and move forward with future discussions. So for me, that was a highlight. And then let's see what else. Upcoming is I'll also be attending the Wilsonville Juneteenth celebration. I'm looking forward to the keynote speaker also. And then I'll be attending the June 29th Korean War grand opening for the center there. I think that will be awesome. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Denwell.
Thank you, Mayor. As Councilor Berry just mentioned a moment ago, we did have the first of 5 task force meetings for the Housing Our Future Task Force, and it consists of public, private, and and our consulting partner, which is Eco Northwest. And the goal of the first of the 5 was to present the housing needs and capacity analysis, the definition of the housing production strategy, and how the goals of this task force align with other city housing efforts. So why does that matter, and why is this task force even doing this? Because we have some really critical questions that we need to answer as a city. So how much growth will occur within Wilsonville within the next 10 years? Where's our buildable land? And do we have enough buildable residential land to accommodate that expected growth? And what policies are needed within the city of Wilsonville to meet those housing needs? Some of those are directed by growth. Some of our growth requirements are also directed at the state level. So to find that place where we can all come together and make sure that we're thinking about the future and thinking about it well is where that task force really can come together and really make really forward-thinking decisions. And there's going to be a process. There will be public meetings. There will be a bit of a road show, so to speak, as we move down all of the different steps of the task force. And you'll hear me communicate some of that information as we move forward after each meeting, because it is critical to the future to make sure that we're really focusing on smart growth for our city. And then I've also been asked to present a little bit of information about, in our council packet tonight, we've got 2 proclamations. The first is that June 17th to the 23rd is Pollinator Week in Wilsonville. And it's designed to raise awareness for pollinators and spread the word about what we can do to protect them. Well, isn't that fun? Well, actually, it's really important. Because whether it's a bird or a bat or a butterfly or a bee, those are responsible for bringing us 1 out of every 3 bites of food that we eat. And this year, the Pollinator Week marks 11 years since the infamous, I call it infamous because it hit the New York Times and the LA Times, of the 2013 bumblebee kill. That was an incident at the Argyle parking lot in Wilsonville. And it was the largest mass bumblebee death of 50,000 bees on record at the time in 2013. And it was due to the egregious misapplication of an insecticide, which was actually applied, it was called Safari, I think, intended to kill aphids on linden trees. And as many of you know, aphids are very common in Wilsonville because linden trees are very common in Wilsonville. They're in a lot of our residential areas. So the bee kill event was actually a catalyst for community change here in Wilsonville. And since that time, the city of Wilsonville has actually become a leader in pollinator conservation. And it's something that I think we should all be really proud of, because there are programs and initiatives now that are in place, such as Bee Stewards, we're a Bee City USA, and that. So I'm really glad that we're recognizing that this week. And then also, July is Parks and Rec Month. And don't those tie together really well? We need trees to have great parks. Again, vitally important to establishing our community. Healthy parks that are approachable, that really breed not only economic prosperity, but a sense of community within Wilsonville. So I'm really excited to know that we're declaring that for the month of July. And that's it for me.
Thank you. I'm glad we've found a good solution to that terrible bee kill. Everybody probably has the same experience where you meet somebody and you say you're from Wilsonville, they bring that up. So let's remember that we recognize it was a big mistake and we continue to work on better solutions. That brings us to our consent agenda. If the city attorney will please, and before you start reading the items, I just want to say something about it, but she's going to read the items on consent, and I just want to note that the City Council packet is published in advance with links to all of these items. And anytime people want to learn more about them, they can email the city and ask questions. But we've covered them all in detail. That's why they are on consent. So please go ahead.
Resolution number 3149, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute a construction contract with Tapani Inc. for the West Side Level B Reservoir and Two's Road Transmission Main Project, capital improvement project numbers 1149, 1150, and 1151. Resolution number 3153, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement contract amendment with Century West Engineering for engineering services during construction of the 2024 street maintenance project, capital improvement project numbers 4014, 4118, 4725. Resolution number 3154, a resolution adopting the canvass of votes of the May 21, 2024 primary election. Resolution number 3157, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing a 3-year capital interfund loan from the Road Operating Fund to the Street Capital Projects Fund. Resolution number 3158, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute the amended and restated intergovernmental agreement of the Regional Water Provider Consortium 2023. Resolution number 3159, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to amend a construction contract with Woodbird Construction CM/GC LLC Inc. to construct the Wilsonville Police Department interim renovations. Resolution number 3160, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing a 2-year capital interfund loan from the Water Operating Fund to the Street Capital Projects Fund, and minutes of the May 17, 2024 special City Council meeting.
Thank you. The consent agenda has been read. May I have a motion?
Your Honor, I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion's been made by Council President Aukervall and seconded by Councilor Berry to approve the consent agenda as read. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. That brings us to new business. Will the city attorney please read the resolution?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I will just note that both resolutions are part of the same presentation, but they will be voted on separately. So I'm going to read the titles of both resolutions. Resolution number 3150, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville adopting administrative rules relating to public contracting activities. And resolution number 3151, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville amending the public art policy and guidelines.
Thank you. We'll go ahead with our staff presentation.
Hi, Mayor and City Councilors. My name is Stephanie Davidson. I'm the Assistant City Attorney. I'm here tonight to present to you on the 2 resolutions that are pending before you tonight. Just to go over how we got here, we've had a number of work sessions and other discussions on the subject matter of tonight's presentation. Most recently, you adopted a new city code section on May 20th. Those code sections will take effect on July 1st. So part of what we are trying to accomplish tonight is to complete the plan that we have presented to you. Earlier on in the process, during our work sessions, we proposed the idea of taking what's currently in the city's public procurement code, leaving some of that content there, the stuff that relates to the city council and its capacity as a local contract review board, the things that relate to compliance with city law or state law and how our city code relates to those state law sections. We propose to you that we leave those sections in the code and shift some of the other content into administrative rules. So part of what we are here to talk about tonight is adopting those administrative rules and completing that plan. The first resolution before you tonight is resolution number 3150. This resolution implements those administrative rules, and just at a very high level, these are the parts that I would say are the most important. We added a definition of professional service, which is the colloquial term used to describe these services in Wilsonville. These are essentially services that require special skill, where the quality of the service depends on unique attributes of the service provider. And what we did is we added that definition, but we also added essentially a carve-out that says that city staff, up to the point where the value of the contract is expected to exceed $100,000, city staff can use any procurement method they would like to obtain that service. Again, the logic is that you need to think about unique attributes of the service provider. And I believe a lot of other local jurisdictions have implemented this rule as well. So currently, up to $25,000, I believe, you have that flexibility, and what we're doing is raising that to $100,000. This doesn't this doesn't get at City Council's approval authority. This just goes to what procurement methods may be used to obtain this service. We implemented the new quarterly report, which part of the change that we made under the city code that will be effective on July 1st is certain contracts can be implemented or signed by the city manager without city council's prior approval. So these quarterly reports just require that on a quarterly basis, the city attorney's office will provide you with a list of those contracts so that you can keep tabs on what has been done. The contracts that you would have previously pre-approved that are now being approved by the city manager. And we've added a couple of new exemptions, the National Citizen Survey, for example, and we've also expanded the exemption related to computer hardware and software. Before we move on, we've covered some of this in greater detail in earlier work sessions and meetings. Do you have any questions about these pieces?
Anybody have any? Go ahead.
Just one question about the quarterly report, and I know we've talked about this in previous meetings and stuff, but now as we're getting quite close to all of this, I'm thinking the delivery of the quarterly report. Is that something that will just be sent in email, kind of like we get our budget quarterly report emailed to us? Is it something that'll get wrapped in city managers' monthly reports, but not every month, obviously, because it's quarterly, or what's the concept there?
So in terms of what's in the administrative rules, we intentionally left it open-ended just to see how this would play out and what your preferences are and how the first couple of reports go. But what were you anticipating?
Yeah, I think the direction that I heard from council, at least initially, was to put it in the city manager reports. And then from there, we can see how that information is working for council, if that's the best avenue. But that's what we anticipate doing at this point.
Okay, I think that makes sense. And then, I mean, it's easily accessible to the community as well, because those are posted online and a great source of information for our community members too. So thank you.
And resolution number 3151, this is a technical fix to a small part of the public art policy, which is a document that is approved by council. There's a reference in that document to city council's approval authority at $100,000, which is something that is changing as of July 1st. So the proposed change still references city code and doesn't change the intent of that section, but just it refers directly to the applicable city code section, so that, you know, if that does change over time, and when it does change on July 1st, the public art policy is in alignment with the public art policy is in alignment with city code. And that's all I have for you tonight. Do you have any questions for me about either resolution? All right.
Seeing no further questions, I will call for the vote. I will call for a motion. It gets pretty late in the evening. I'm going to call for a motion first on resolution 3150.
Your Honor, I move to adopt resolution number 3150.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
The motion's been moved by Councilor Linville and seconded by Councilor Berry. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mayor. Regarding discussion, all I would like to do is just call out that Thank you, Stephanie, first of all, for the presentation. But if anybody has any questions why, we're having so little discussion about this today and questions about it, is that I would recommend that any member of the public or any citizen go back in time, because this was covered and we did ask extensive questions regarding why the recommendation to lift the limit. And I think that we received adequate evidence as to why that was a logical decision, given the economies and the amount of time and the increases in costs. So, thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up. Anything else? So, as council, I would just second what Councilor Dunwell just said, that we've spent quite a bit of time on this in previous meetings. Appreciate the work you've done to answer all of our questions, and also, well, I'll talk about the other one at the next vote, but any other questions? All right, I will now call for the vote on resolution number 3150. All in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. I will now ask for a motion on resolution 3151.
Your Honor, I move to adopt resolution number 3151.
Or a second?
I'll second it.
Motion's been moved by Councilor Linville and seconded by Councilor Berry. Is there any discussion on this resolution?
I have just one comment, and that is that this is an example of sometimes after implementation and review of a policy and guidelines, that it becomes apparent that amending those is appropriate to do. And this is one of those cases, and it's one that we have also discussed previously. So thank you.
All right, seeing no further discussion, I will call for a vote on the resolution. All in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. That brings us to city manager's business.
Nothing tonight, Your Honor. I did want to let you all know that since we won't have a meeting, first meeting in July, that I will be out the 5th through the 12th in D.C. and New York on vacation. Ms. Troha will be coming back from her vacation on the 4th, so.
Our assistant city manager will be
We'll be here.
city managing.
Every time I've gone on vacation, something has happened.
I hope nothing happens. I hope that means nothing will happen.
No guarantees.
And I hope that you have a well-deserved vacation. You and your staff have been working very hard, and you deserve a vacation. Since you're going to be in Washington, D.C., could we ask you to do a few meetings? No, I'm just kidding. Just a joke. Okay. So, but while we're on the city manager's report, I really want to call attention to this very detailed section in the packet, which is the city manager report. And it just has so much detailed information. We have this once a month from the departments, including statistics from the police department, updates from Parks and Recreation, what they're doing. The library, you have statistics. And I think the one that, let's see, I wanted to call out one thing that was really noticeable here. I think it was in the Public Works Department. You're talking about a culmination of several years of work opening our new Public Works facility. That is featured in this week's, or this month's city manager packet. And there's also a feature on not only the utilities and construction of the Willamette Water Supply Project at Beckman Road and 95th, but also the roads crew doing a number of activities. So please look at that. A tremendous amount of detail showing the work you do with your staff.
Mayor, thank you for highlighting that, because if you do want to know what's currently going on in the city, that monthly report gives you a very high-level overview with pictures about everything that's going on in every department. So, and the departments do a great job of putting those reports together, so.
And you can go back in time and read those if you're wondering things. You can Google them. I've tried this. So there's a tremendous amount of detail. It doesn't go away. Thank you. Legal business.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 items for you for the council tonight. First, city staff have provided comment on Washington County case file number L24001-D(IND) regarding a land use application before Washington County for expansion of a contractor's establishment adjacent to and accessing Southwest Day Road, a City of Wilsonville street facility. It is anticipated that a decision will be issued by the Washington County Hearings Officer prior to the council's July 15, 2024 City Council meeting, and so staff requests a motion authorizing city staff to file an appeal with the Land Use Board of Appeals on case file number L24000-D(IND) if a decision adverse to the city is rendered. So what we are looking for tonight as staff is a motion that says something to the effect of, I move to authorize city staff to file an appeal with the Land Use Board of Appeals on Washington County case file number L2400001-D(IND) if a decision adverse to the city is rendered.
Thank you.
Can I just say so moved?
That works.
Thank you. Motion as described by the city attorney has been made by Council President Ockervall. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
And it's been seconded by Councilor Berry. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0.
And the second item I wanted to note for council is that I will be out of the office from Thursday, June 20, returning Monday, July 8th. And so Assistant City Attorney Stephanie Davidson will be available for any issues or questions during my absence.
Thank you very much. That concludes our meeting. Meeting is adjourned at 8:07 p.m.